and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Mike Salguero of ButcherBox. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
So I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a really small farm community of about 2,500 people. I ended up there. I was born in Paraguay. My mother is Colombian. My father's Uruguayan. My mother's half Colombian, half New Englander. My parents got divorced when I was 4 months old, and my mom moved up to Western Mass to be near her grandparents, who were like kind of the only stable people at that time. People who like all of her other siblings and stuff were in school and whatnot. So I grew up there, youngest of four, single mother. Not a lot of like structure, not a lot of rules.
Mm,
Definitely at an early age figured out that I needed to like make money if I wanted to spend money.
yeah.
Always dreamed about that pair of Air Jordans that never came. Had a paper route at the age of 10.
Wow.
And just basically, I very early on, I had the model of my uncle who was an entrepreneur and my grandfather who was an entrepreneur, and really wanted to follow in their footsteps. And in
Mm,
many ways, like wanted to like work with them, wanted to like prove myself that I was good enough that someday maybe they'd hire me for what
for
they were
sure.
doing. And so I, you know, worked hard, tried to be an entrepreneur, ended up going to boarding school for high school.
Mm,
My mom, I don't want to say she forced it, but she kind of like the school I was in was not very rigorous, and she could tell that I was a pretty smart, gifted kid.
yeah.
And so yeah, so I went to boarding school. Uh, Never really felt like a fit in there.
Mm,
And then I went to Boston to go to college, and immediately like it was much easier. School was much easier than boarding school. And
yeah.
so I decided to make the city of Boston my education, and just ran around with this crowd of other guys who were going to school and working full time.
Mm,
And so throughout my college experience, I not only worked, but I also held jobs both as a magician, as a hot dog vendor at Fenway Park,
wow.
as a waiter, as a chef, like a whole bunch of different things, just trying to
For
hustle.
sure. For sure. I'd love to dive into this sector of, first of all, like what were you studying during this time? And I know, I mean, your mind had to be super busy. I mean, you always had jobs studying, but you wanted to aspire like your grandfather and uncle too. So how did your
Yeah.
entrepreneurial like pursuits play into this role in here?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was so I went to school at Boston University. I started in the business school for undergrad. And within a year, I guess a year and a half, I left the business school and just went to study whatever I wanted to.
Mhm.
And mainly it was because I disagreed with the way they were teaching business. This was like 1999 and 2000. And
Okay.
at the time, it was like entrepreneurship wasn't cool. Like it wasn't something that you taught at school. It was more
Yeah.
like, here's how you get on the fast track to go work at Bear Stearns. And if you don't have an internship at Morgan Stanley this summer, like forget it. You're not going to succeed in this world.
Yeah.
And I just didn't think that that was like my path. I never thought that was my path. I wanted to go to business school because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I just decided to go learn other stuff.
Mm,
So I ended up getting like an international relations degree. I
okay.
studied abroad in Mongolia. I backpacked through Ecuador by myself. And at that point, it was more like being entrepreneurial and pulling up like life experiences versus being entrepreneurial, like trying to make money.
Yeah.
As soon as I got out of school, so I graduated early, 3.5 years, I graduated.
Okay.
And then I started working in real estate. And that's when like the real entrepreneurial fire was stoked. And I just started working for
Mm,
myself, with the
incredible.
exception of a 3 year block where I decided I didn't know enough and I needed to go get a real job, which was a whole other journey that I regret because at the time there just weren't that many resources for entrepreneurs who wanted to be entrepreneurs. Or
Yeah.
at
I
least
mean,
I didn't find them.
I feel like that's an important piece I would love to touch on if you're able to. Like what was that job? What were you doing in that 3 year period?
Okay, so I was a real estate guy. I was doing rentals and sales,
Yeah.
and then basically the season is January to September. That first year, I crushed it. Like I was brand new, but I sold a ton. I think I made like $80,000, which is more money than I had made
Wow.
first year out of school, working 9 months, and like it's all kind of it's all like 1099 income.
That's incredible at that time.
Yeah. And so I was like, sweet, I know how to make money. This is great. And then I decided that in September, I was going to stop being a real estate guy and I was going to go live with my father, who I didn't know at all. So I went to Uruguay and basically lived with my dad for 3 months. I
Mm,
wanted to like learn who this man was, who was 50% of me. The
yeah.
next year, I started back up in January and I ran until like July. And in July, I had launched this T-shirt. This is like 2004. I had created this T-shirt that said "Buck Fush" on it. I actually have one on my bookshelf. I can pull it up, but it said "Buck Fush" on it. So F Bush.
Yeah.
And I made it as a joke. And at the time, I was like selling T-shirts. I like for St. Patrick's Day, I printed a Boston T-shirt and sold these Shamrock T-shirts and sold 200 of them. So I created this T-shirt. I sold it outside at different events, and it was selling like hotcakes. So I
Mm.
decided to like leave the real estate thing and just go sell T-shirts. And between July and the election in November, I sold like 17,000 T-shirts,
Wow.
which was like wild. It was so fun. It was such
Wow.
a fun time. Um, that's a lot of T-shirts, by the way. That's
That
like
is.
a ton of T-shirts. More than a ton, actually. So after that, I decided like I was left with like inventory and really no cash to speak of. I was like, where did all the money go? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to like go learn how, like, I just need to like professionalize myself.
Yeah.
And so like I couldn't find a job. Like no one would hire me. I went to the career center at BU and they were like, we can't help you. And I was like, okay, I'll never
Mm,
give you a dime. And I don't think any of your
yeah.
audience should either. Um,
Yeah.
and, and then I basically like found somebody, introduced me to somebody. I ended up going on 85 informational interviews between like October of 23 and when someone finally took a chance on me, which was like May of the next year. And I was sleeping on
Mm,
couches, working odd jobs, and just pounding the pavement and networking. And so I have a
wow.
lot. I learned the hard way, being told
Yeah.
no, having to sell myself. A lot of my jobs were sales, so I knew how to sell myself. But just this like constant, relentless, like I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna make it happen. If somebody tells me no, that's one less person before I can like accomplish what I need to. And I
Yeah.
just took like an entrepreneurial, like dogged, persistent approach to getting a job. And then I got
Yeah.
there and I'm like, oh shit, like this isn't what I was looking for. My job, my job was in real estate development. I was like a project manager for real estate development projects. It was
Okay.
great. I learned Excel. Like I think real estate's a great place to learn how like businesses are valued because there's expenses and it's a lot easier than a business to like understand the inner workings of like the ROI and the IRR and all these things. So I did
Yeah.
that for 3 years. I like to say that I was rotting under the fluorescent lights. I went to school at Babson to get my MBA because the company I was working for paid for me to go to school.
Okay.
So I got my MBA, and then I tried. This was like got to the downturn of 28
Yeah.
or 2008. Sorry, the real estate market like collapsed. The
Yeah.
company I was working for, residential real estate developer, was just like letting go of people left and right, and I tried really hard to get let go. They had a couple of rounds of layoffs, and I did not get laid off in the first round, but in the second round I did. And I was trying hard to
Mm,
get laid off because what I wanted to do was to collect unemployment
for sure.
and start a company. And that is what happened. I was laid off.
Wow.
My buddy and I had been trying for like 6 months to find something, some sort of company to start or to buy. And it
Mm,
just like all the stars aligned. I got laid off. I actually was sleeping on his couch for 2 weeks. And during
wow.
that time, a deal that I had tried to put together came together. And that became our first company, which was custommade.com.
Wow. So this is such a good segue. Like 2008. And so high risk tolerance you guys had in 2008, but also it sounded like you didn't have much to lose. But what did that kind of purchase and what did that decision look like for you guys?
You mean to buy the
Customade.com. I
company?
know to buy the company. Yeah. What was the
Yeah.
current state of
So,
the company?
okay. So, one of the things that I think is like there's a misconception out there about entrepreneurs and how much risk they're willing to take. So
Yeah.
what did my co-founder and I really do? We both were working at, well, I guess I was, no, when we started talking to the guy, we were both working, and then I got laid off. But
Mhm.
ultimately, there was this website. It was called custommade.com. It was owned by a woodworker. It made $35,000 a year, and we offered him. I'd written to him 6 months prior and was like, "Would you ever sell?" And he said, finally, he was like, "I'll sell." We offered him 4 times revenue, so $140,000. We didn't have
Mm.
$140,000. And so what we
Yeah.
did is we gave him a check for $5,000. That was the down payment. And we had 90 days of due diligence and 30 days to close. And what we did, we were like, we don't really have that much due diligence here because we're going to like completely change everything. So what we did is we went and raised money. And
Yeah.
so, ultimately, what did we risk? We risked $5,000. And it was
Yeah.
like our shot. It was that's still a lot of money, but it was like, hey, we think this is real. And so all we're really doing is making a bet on our ability to pound the pavement and raise money. And
Yeah.
we went out and raised $500,000 in a convertible. Um, and over the course of the next 8 years, we raised about $30 million of financing from
Wow.
Google Ventures and First Round Capital and Accomplice and a bunch of others.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite the ride. And again,
Yeah.
like my experience of being told no by all the informational interviews that I did came came up again as and also, by the way, that experience, like I sold food at Fenway Park as like a walking vendor, and like nothing's
Yeah.
worse than the beginning of April selling Diet Coke in the bleachers. Like no one buys that. Everyone says no to that too. So I learned very
Yeah.
early, like everyone's going to say no. You just have to like keep hustling, right? Just if you run faster,
Yeah.
you'll sell more. So I went from that informational interviews, trying to raise my first round. It was like no, no, no. And then really when we tried to raise our first institutional round, which was in 2011, so kind of 3 years into the business, everybody said no. I mean, we called it the summer of
Mhm.
no. It was like woodworker website, like hell no. I'm not interested in this. And
Yeah.
ultimately, we were able to find somebody at Google who believed in what we were doing. And once he
Mm.
said, "I'm in," everybody collapsed, and the everyone was in.
Interesting. So, I mean, an individual can shift the entire perspective, but what do you think resulted in that? Did you guys transition
Oh,
anything in the business,
dude, yeah,
transform, or
no,
what
it's crazy.
what is that?
It's nuts. It's such a great story. So everyone said no. And
Yeah.
what we built is like custommade.com was a listing service at the time. It was like a yellow pages for woodworkers who would put up their whole
Mhm.
portfolio. And the reason why we liked it is when you talk to these makers, they're like, I get all my business from that website and I pay $35 a year for a subscription. And we're like, this is like a
Mm.
shack in Manhattan. These people are bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of projects and they're paying $35. So what we're going to do is we're going to overhaul the website. At the time, it was like you had to email the webmaster to like upload your stuff. So we were going to like bring it into 2008
Yeah.
and then like expand it from just woodworking to like other things that could be custom, like jewelry and glasswork and all this other stuff. That was the initial
Mm.
premise. And we ran with that for the first 3 years, and it was a subscription business. It was pretty good. We were almost profitable. Then we decided
Mhm.
to raise money. And when we went out to raise money, people were like, we're not investing in a woodworker listing service. Like, hell no. I was in a meeting with a venture capitalist with my co-founder Seth, and we're sitting there,
Mhm.
and we had built this feature called the job board, where people can post like something that they're interested in getting built. Like, I live in New York, I want this bookshelf, and then makers could bid on it. And I'm like, pull up the job board.
Okay.
We pull up the job board, and we made it real time so you could see the jobs coming in. And because we owned
Mhm.
custommade.com and had been around since 1996, it got a ton of inbound traffic. So the job
Yeah.
orders that were coming in, the people that were interested in getting a job done, it was like boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, all we have to do is stand in between those transactions and we can be the largest marketplace for anything custom. As soon
Yeah.
as I said the word marketplace, like literally, they're
Mm.
like, marketplace? You could be the next, what was it? You could be the next Airbnb. I was like, yeah. And then everyone was in. And the reason why is because in
Wow.
2011, when we were raising money, Airbnb had just gotten hot, Uber had gotten hot, and like everyone was looking, VCs in many ways are pattern matchers. Everyone was looking for marketplaces. And because we said the word
Yeah.
marketplace, it was like, oh yeah, I'm into that. And that, I think important in business, important when you're starting a company, and even when you're, starting small or you're raising money, is to tune
Yeah.
into the signals, because sometimes the signals are so tiny. It's just like somebody being like,
Mm.
marketplace, oh, and you're like, holy shit, like that's it. And then like
Yeah.
that was it. Now, the problem was that
Yeah.
we then went and raised, by the end of it, so we raised $2 million. 6 months later, we raised $4 million. A year later, we raised $16 million, and the marketplace
Mm.
didn't really work. Like as a business concept, it was actually a bit flawed, because these custom transactions, like the makers aren't very good at communicating online. The customer like really wants to talk to someone. We're trying to stand in between and take a fee, and like
Mm.
it actually didn't work. Uh, but because we had done such a good job of selling this concept of a marketplace, we could not unwind it. And one of the challenges, so the company ended up going under. My co-founder
Okay.
pivoted it out geniusly, and now custommade.com still runs. It's a custom jewelry site for engagement rings and other stuff, where they can make you something like way higher quality, and they make every
Yeah.
piece. Like, it's them. It's not like we're going to connect you with a maker who makes it. It's like custom made is going to help you through the process. And that was the right business to run, is like where we help you with the
Interesting.
process versus like we introduce you to a maker. But at the
Yeah.
time, like what I was passionate about was helping people making a living doing what they love, and helping, like, there's always been a thread of mission in everything I've done, where I'm like trying to start a movement, change the way people think, like revolutionize an industry. It started with like t-shirts and anti George Bush, and like trying to like and it took off. Like people would wear this. I'd go out and I'd see people wearing this shirt. It's like, oh wow, like started something. And then it turned into
Yeah.
like getting your furniture made by a local maker instead of getting it from Pottery Barn. And then that turned into what
Mm.
I'm doing now, which is like, there's a better way to eat meat. And like
Yeah.
we can bring that to the world in a way that scales, and can be accessible.
I love it. So let's get into the transition, though. This is around
Yep.
2015. Was this directly after your departure with Custom Made? Like, what does that transition look like for you
Yeah.
personally?
So in 2014, in September of 2014, my co-founder was like, I was the CEO of the company, and he was like the board chair and also the COO. And so in
Okay.
2014, 6 years into the business, he's like, look, I feel like it's the fourth quarter and I haven't been able to be the quarterback yet. I want to be the quarterback. I want to be CEO. And I was like,
Mm.
okay. So he took over as CEO in September of 2014. And at that time, like the company, it was clear that the company was like going under.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what, kind of like poking around, working, but also like, what else is out there? What else is happening? And was thinking about a few ideas, starting a few companies and whatever. And really what I wanted to do was to create a hobby, like a side hustle that would cover my nut, so
Mm.
that I could then go do whatever I want. That was the dream. Like, cover your nut and then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's like every, small entrepreneur's dream, or big entrepreneur's dream. And
Mm.
so I couldn't figure out, like, there's a whole story around like how I decided upon ButcherBox, and like we were trying to eat healthy, and I started buying meat and I started selling it to my friends because we were buying too much meat. And one of my buddies was like,
Mm.
this would be so much easier if it was delivered to my house. And I was like, oh yeah, how would I deliver it to your house? And then I just tried to figure out how
Yeah.
to deliver it to your house, and I couldn't figure it out until I like met the former head of operations of Omaha Steaks, who I hunted down on LinkedIn,
Mm.
and he opened some doors. And so my plan was to, run Custom Made into the ground, which happened on Memorial Day weekend of 2015. And then I was gonna like take
Okay.
100 days off and like go do a silent meditation and just chill out and like hang out with my newborn daughter and all this other stuff. And what
Yeah.
ended up happening is I took the weekend off and I started ButcherBox.
Wow.
So Memorial Day weekend was a long weekend. We went to Colorado and then got back on Monday night, and on Tuesday morning, I had hired an intern out of Babson, this guy Bobby,
Okay.
and Bobby was at my doorstep at 8:30 in the morning, and he's like, "All right, what are we doing?" And I'm like, I guess we'll go find a coffee shop because I have no idea what we're doing." Like, welcome.
Wow.
And that was another thing is like when I started ButcherBox, I had just run like I thought it was going to be a hobby. I didn't expect it to be a big business, but I knew that if
Yeah.
I was the person that was going to have to do all the work, like it just wouldn't go anywhere because I had led other people for 7 years, and I
Yeah.
just didn't think that I would have it in me. Like if it was just me, I'm not sure ButcherBox would have ever started. So I found this $11 an
Mm.
hour intern out of the entrepreneurial college in Boston, and decided to pay him
Wo
to get the thing going. And I decided I was going to put ten thousand
Wow.
dollars of my own money in, and I wasn't going to raise money, and I was just going to prove. Well, for one, I had a small vision, but I also had a
Yeah.
chip on my shoulder about how venture capital isn't the only way to capitalize a company, and I was going to prove that you could do it differently, and that's what we set out to prove.
Love it. Love it. So Bobby shows up day one. What does that meeting look like? What does his duties look like as like an intern to really scale ButcherBox to
Yeah,
where
I mean,
it's crazy?
literally the first half of the day was like figuring out where we were going to work. Um, but the first thing was at that point I knew I had made contact with the Omaha Steaks guy who had put me in touch with this place in Wisconsin that did cutting of steaks and meat, and also fulfillment.
Okay.
So it was like a one-stop shop where we could cut our meat and then ship it out.
Yeah.
And so again, I was trying to do hobbies, so everything was like going to be outsourced. And I had already made, I think that was it. That maybe I had made a contact with the people who like potentially could build the website. And I
Mhm.
also had a buddy of mine, Bobby, who runs this design firm, Soldier, who I had been talking about like building out the brand of ButcherBox. And so all three of those
Yeah.
people I had like been like, okay, I'll give you pieces of the company and you can like work and let's move this forward.
Yeah.
But Bobby's first task was like, go find anyone who's written about grass-fed beef on Twitter and put them on a list. And then we'll send that list to people in the Philippines, and we'll like try to find their websites and try to email them and try to get them, like, hey, I think we had some questions at that point. Then it became
Yeah.
like go stand outside of Whole Foods and ask people if they know the price of ground beef, or do they buy grass fed beef, or like would they buy 8 pounds of meat delivered to their house? And
Mhm.
really quickly we learned when I started it was just going to be grass fed beef. We learned that it was like way too much beef to be sending to people's house. So people wanted. So when we launched our Kickstarter in September, we launched with beef,
Yeah.
chicken, and pork. We now have
Okay.
a lot more than that, but yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was just kind of like further validate the concept, see if the concept
Yeah.
works. We did use that like lean startup canvas where you've got like you come up with a hypothesis and then you try to figure out the one thing that would kill that hypothesis and just ran with that
Yeah.
and we ended up launching our Kickstarter in September of September. That was like September 9th or something.
Okay.
So we spent 3.5 months getting all the pieces together. Bobby then went back to school. I found this other guy, Mike Philby, who stepped in and we got going. And things took off like immediately. First day, we blew through our goal and
Love it.
knew we had something.
Yeah, let's dive into the Kickstarter campaign. So, for those who contributed, what were the incentives, the perks, and why do you think it succeeded so well?
So, I mean, the first perk was a mooing cow for $1, where we sent you like a MP3 file of a cow mooing, which is funny. We got a couple hundred of those. That was pretty sweet, as well as like
Wow.
T-shirt. And then we had like a 1 month box, 3 month, 6 month, 12 month, and then we did two $5,000 like meet for the year, and then we'll fly out and throw you a party. And the idea with those
Wow.
is like I could call some people and like try to sell. We sold two of those. Um,
Okay.
So at the time, this is 2015. I don't know if this is true today, but the hunch was that Kickstarter was gameable. And
Mm,
I could talk for a whole hour about this, but like two-sided
for sure.
marketplaces, there tends to be arbitrages like at certain points. And in
Yeah.
2015 was a point where it seemed like there was a way to game Kickstarter where you could like set yourself out ahead of everyone. And it seemed to be circled
Mm,
around this verified badge. It was like once you got Kickstarter verified, you showed up on the homepage, you showed up at the top of the food page, you were in the emails,
uh,
and like so it became. We basically tried to, we watched Kickstarter. We worked with a consultant as well, and we tried to reverse engineer how would you get the Kickstarter verified badge. And it seemed like it was based on like speed of hitting your goal, how fat, like the
mm,
velocity of people coming in, and then we also like I weaseled my way to one of the co-founders of Kickstarter and reached out to him, and he actually wrote back, and like I let him know that we were doing a campaign and all that stuff. And so what we
wow.
did is we were like, we need to hit our goal like immediately. And so the weeks prior, we were lining up, and I think these tactics still work, by the way. We were lining up all
Mhm.
the people, including the $5,000 people, so that when we launched, we're like, hey, we just launched. And I wrote to people and I was like, we're trying to game Kickstarter here. So if you, the best thing you could do is buy what you're going to buy within the first hour of us launching. So that is like, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
We launched within a couple of hours. We hit our goal. Within 48 hours, we were verified, and then
Wow.
what happens, which is beautiful, is there's so many people on Kickstarter that your project's now getting eyeballs, that it starts to be
Mm,
not just your network. The hardest part about Kickstarter is you're trying to
yeah.
like get your network to like buy stuff, which is hard to
Yeah.
do. Like, after a while, it's just kind of like, all right, guys, like please buy again, which it doesn't work. So
Yeah.
we went out to raise $25,000 in pre-sales. We wanted
Mm,
more, but we said 25,000 so we could blow through our goal. And we
yeah.
raised 215,000 in pre-sales in 30 days.
Wow.
And about 50,000 of that was like people that we knew, and everything else was just like randos who were on Kickstarter. Um,
Wow.
and then we
Incredible.
launched the website the day after Kickstarter ended, and just went to town. Shipped out the
That's
boxes, like
incredible.
shipped out the. I
Yeah.
think we had 1,100 like month one boxes, including the 3 month, 6 month, and 12 month. And then called all of them. Hey, how's it going? It was this guy, Nicky Graham. Nicky Graham. He'd called every single freaking person. How's it going? This is Nicky Graham. Just I'm trying to check in, see how your box is doing. By the way, we're gonna do this as a subscription, and we would love to have you as a member. Are you interested? We got 35% of
Mm,
people to line up, and so right away we had about 400 subscribers. Which I had said at the very beginning, if we have 1,000 subscribers, this is a sexy business. And so we started
yeah.
with 400, and we were making like a $20 to $30 profit on each person. So you're starting with $10,000 in profit, which then
It's
goes to
huge.
pay a couple of interns, and like things started rolling.
Yeah.
That's how we got going.
It's huge. So, what did the supply chain look like once you guys officially launched Kickstarter? This is nationwide. Did you guys contact local farmers in those regions? What did that supply chain overall look
Yeah, so
like?
when we started, well, it was 48 states. We still don't
Okay.
ship to Alaska and Hawaii, although someday we will.
Yeah.
When we started, we really were centralized around this cutter, this like cutting facility that was attached to the distribution facility. So we were using their
Yeah.
farm contacts. So they had pig farmers in Iowa, cattle farmers in Iowa, and the chicken was coming from, I think, Virginia or Georgia. I think let's call it Virginia. And
Yeah.
so, we didn't really have any relationships with any farmers. It was more like utilizing what they're doing and then making sure that our spec, like our specifications, were there. So we wanted grass
Mm,
fed, grass finished, which is like never been fed, grains and whatever. We wanted
mhm.
what they call never ever antibiotics or hormones. So animals that have never been administered an antibiotic or a hormone. We and
Yeah.
so we basically built out a suite of products that we thought would sell, and that facility ended up purchasing all of it. And at the
Oh, wow.
time, like, we were getting charged an arm and a leg for
Mm,
product, and we
mm,
did not care. We cared, but we did not care because that wasn't like the primary thing. That wasn't the primary problem. And again, I think this is like important for entrepreneurs. Is like, if you focus on all of the problems at the same time, you can't focus on any of the problems. And so
yeah.
like we knew that we were overpaying for chicken that was going in the box. We had a box, it was $129 price point. We knew we were overpaying for the chicken. We knew our profit was lower than it should be. But instead of worrying about that, we were just like, that doesn't matter. Like, just go sell more and eventually
Yep.
it'll matter. And so when we got to about
Interesting. Yeah.
6,000 subscribers, basically a year after launching. Then I hired somebody who actually knew what he was doing, and that was this guy Mike Billings, who was had retired. He ran meat and seafood at BJ's, which is like Costco on the East Coast.
Yeah.
He ran a meat and seafood there for like 20 years, and he was bored and wanted to go back to work. And he really was the one who helped me shape this business from like um, something that's like, oh, all these claims are like really important, and like we want to provide this meat that has XYZ claim, to figuring out like, how do you
Yeah.
scale that program? Because if it's going to be a big business, you need to learn, it can't just be like Farmer Joe's, cows. You need to figure out the
Yeah.
whole scalability issue. And he helped do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a bold statement on, I mean, how his responsibility resulted in the
Oh yeah.
success or most of it. So what did his duties look like then? Did he leverage his contacts from
Yeah,
prior, or
yeah,
what
yeah,
what did that
yeah, yeah. He just
look
called
like?
everyone he knew. So he just started
Yeah.
running procurement. At that point, like we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, we at that point had moved from this one facility cutting everything. We found another facility that to start like helping with stuff. But we didn't know. Like we knew nothing. We were just, we knew, we knew that the product that we
Yeah.
were providing people was up to the specifications that we were looking for, but we were like overpaying. Like, I
Mm,
remember Mike came in and he's like, he looks at our stuff. He's like, wow, you guys are paying a lot for chicken. I think I can get 3 pounds for the same price that you're buying a pound for. It was like,
mm,
great. Like, so now all of
yeah.
a sudden our customer who had been with us, and these are your early adopters who are like willing to put up with a lot, instead of getting 1 pound of chicken breast, is now getting 3 pounds of chicken breast. And so we were just able to provide a better and better
Mm,
value to the customer,
mm,
because we had a buyer who actually knew what he was doing. And I
yeah.
think one thing for entrepreneurs, one of our core values is relentless improvement. And I think with a core
Mm,
value of relentless improvement, which is this idea that you can always improve, one of the freeing things is that you can start like small. You can start with not
yeah.
all the things together. You can start with like, oh, okay, we're going to lose money on this, but that's okay because if we do this, we'll be fine. And
Mm,
our customers and our employees and really everyone has just like, I think it's a real benefit is like, we can start and just get something going, and then just know that we are going to relentlessly improve that thing all the way.
mm. I love that. I'm gonna actually like mark that. That's such a good clip.
Sweet.
But kind of tying back into your teacher organic virality that you had, and also kind of the launch of the Kickstarter campaign. What marketing worked well for ButcherBox? It's a pretty new concept at the
Yeah.
time. So what did you guys
Yeah.
do?
So the concept of ButcherBox was not totally new. If you think about it, at that point, 2015, meal kit companies were really big. So Blue Apron
Mm,
was the big one, and then there was HelloFresh, and there was apparently like 125 Blue Apron lookalikes out there. And so
yeah.
the concept of somebody getting a box and getting recipes was actually like fairly common. In fact, the concept
Mm,
of getting a box and not even being able to say what, like not even being able to choose what's inside, is like people were like used to that because of Blue Apron. And so
yeah.
our initial launch, because we didn't have any money, we couldn't hold inventory. So I couldn't guess like, oh, we're going to sell 100 ribeyes this week. Let me hold 400 ribeyes, and that lasts me a month, because every ribeye is going to cost me $15, and that's like $6,000 that I don't have sitting on a shelf. And so
Yeah.
what we did is we did a curated box, and it was like the butcher's selection, where you chose beef and chicken, or beef, chicken, and pork. And then we sent you what we thought you would like. And what
Mm,
we did is we put in about 5 different cuts of meat in there. It was about 8 to 12 pounds. We put in recipe cards that would like teach you how to cook things or sent you to places on the website. And
yeah.
that was the first go round. It took about
Mm,
2 years until we had enough customers and enough people complaining that like they didn't want us to choose what they got, where we launched Custom
mm,
Box, which was like where people could choose. But early
got
on,
it.
even in the Kickstarter campaign, we had been, as I told you, Bobby was reaching out to people who had mentioned grass fed beef on Twitter. And the two groups that really did a lot of grass fed beef talking was, well, the one group in particular was like the paleo Whole30 crowd. People that are
Yeah.
eating like cavemen, like our ancestors did, and trying to clean up their diet and eat clean food. And
Yeah.
we reached out to those people during the Kickstarter campaign, or before the Kickstarter campaign, to ask for their support of the Kickstarter campaign. And there was one doctor
Mm,
in particular named Chris Kresser, who is a great guy, who tweeted about us and was like, gosh, I should find this tweet instead of just anyway. It was something to the line of like, this is a cool company. They launched this Kickstarter and selling grass fed beef, and we saw a flurry of activity. Um, and
mm,
again, this was by a flurry. I mean, like we had like 7 sales from that Twitter thing. And again, this is like the
yeah.
smallest signal can be so big. And
Yeah.
we were like, that's going to work. And so what we did for the first 2.5 years is we reached out to anybody in the paleo influencer like space, and
Yeah.
actually Thrive Market had really like already run this playbook. So Thrive had already asked all of these influencers, from Tim Ferriss to Mark Sisson
Mm,
to Whole30 to all these people, had asked all of them, hey, can you help me, can you help us like get the word out. And so we just basically found the people that were writing about Thrive, and then asked them if they would
yeah.
write about ButcherBox. And the pitch, which was I think pretty elegant, was at the time what we did is we reached out to them. We're like, hey, we're putting these recipe cards in our box. We're a grass-fed beef company. We need recipes to send to our customers. Do you mind if we use this recipe? And we'll of course put your
Uh,
name and your website on it. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, no problem. And they're like, by the way, what's ButcherBox? Like, what do you do? And we're like, oh, funny you should ask. This is what we do. Would you like to promote us? And we can't pay up front, but we can pay your residual on the customers that you bring in. And they're like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And that's how we started.
mm,
And we really ran the influencer thing, which, by the way, I don't think you could do today. I think it's like you have to find a different marketing tactic if you're going to start this company today. But
so
yeah,
expensive.
we
Yeah.
ran that influencer thing to like $50 million before we touched anything else.
Wow.
Like it was just,
Wow.
a lot of times you're like trying to find that signal, trying to find that hole with some oil in it, and once you do, don't go
Mm,
looking for any more oil until that thing is like you're fracking every last drop out of it. And so that's what we did.
yeah.
We just focused on that, started building out a team. Like I want every influencer in this arena. Let's just get them all, get them all, get them all deep in the programs.
Mm,
Who's promoting what? Hey, we have a new, every couple of weeks it was like a new launch, a new promotion. Get as many influencers promoting as possible. Build the
yeah.
system. Go.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I would love to dive into that a little bit more. When you would launch like new products, for example, were you sending influencers product, and they would, what kind of content were they creating?
Yeah,
What kind of
so
influencers were these
we
that you were
did we
launching?
did send them product if they asked. If they didn't, we were happy to not. But most of the good ones
Yeah.
are like, all right, well, send me what you've got, and we were happy to do that because
Yeah.
our product performs really well, it eats really well, it's like awesome.
Mhm.
And then it was like a variety of what works. So some people are like, oh, I'll post on social media, and it's like, it's not really working. Or like, oh, I'll include you in like my weekly roundup, or it's like all these topics, and then like, by the way, you can buy from ButcherBox. It's like, oh, that doesn't really work either. What worked for us was a dedicated email that was like,
Mm.
this is ButcherBox, buy ButcherBox. Here's a promotion, like, sign up today and get free bacon in your first box and $25 off or whatever. Now our
Yeah.
promotions are like a lot more aggressive than that. Um,
Yeah.
and then, so what worked was dedicated email blast, and then 7 day later, last chance email. That was what
Mm.
we were trying to push those influencers for constantly. Email blast,
Yeah.
7 day. Email blast, 7 day. And not everyone did it. Some people are like, oh, just do social media. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that's not going to work well. We're trying to help you make
Yeah.
money, and that's not going to help you
Yeah.
make money. But if you want to do that, that's what you do. Nowadays, so and I always preface this with like a lot of ButcherBox was timing. Like, we got lucky. Nowadays, I don't think you could run that program. I don't think it would work,
Yeah.
because a lot of those influencers now want to be paid up front. It's like
Yeah. Exactly.
$20,000 to send an email. So if you're like with no money, it'd be very hard to like get going.
Yeah. I feel like today it's very rare on performance based. It's rather just
Yep.
upfront based on immediate kit one
Yep.
fee. Yeah. Yeah, looking at ButcherBox in the past like couple of years, you guys have scaled from, I'm not sure revenue, what it's looking like this year, but 400, 500, almost like 600 million. What do you think were those key pivotal points for the turning of ButcherBox that kind of resulted in the jump in the past few years?
Well, it's actually been a slowdown in the past few years. So
Really?
it like we started in 15, Kickstarter year we did about 300 or 500 grand, then 5
Mm.
million, then 35 million, then 105 million, then 225, then 450. And so that ramp up was like really, really, really quickly.
Yeah.
The COVID year was 220 to 450. And
Mm.
then 2021 was 450 to 550. It was like the first year that we didn't
Wow.
like at least double the business. And then
Yeah.
last year was 550 to 557. So like
Okay.
barely any growth. And this year will be the first down year that we've had as a company. And I think like there's lots of reasons for that, macro environment wise, as well as like we as a company have had struggles. Like, we grew so quickly, it's taken a bit to digest and like learn how to operate in a larger company and all those things. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. So the inflections, like the best analogy I've heard on like how things change is teams of people change what every time you multiply by 3. So one person startup
Mm.
different than 3 people. 3 people different than
Yeah.
9 people, 9 different than 27, 27 to 81. And so if you know where you are in that right, so if you're like a 15-person startup, you really need to be thinking about what 27 means. And 27 is
Okay.
like hierarchy, right? So like when you're 9 people, there's no hierarchy. It's like everyone reports to me, and it's like, cool. When you're 27, it's too many people. So now you need to have like your cabinet or your executive team or whatever, and then you need people reporting to
Yeah.
those people. And then from 27 to 81, it's like you can't have everyone doing whatever they want anymore. Like when you start,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, just do whatever you think is best. At 81, it's like, you can't do that because Jesse over here needs this done and this person over here needs this done. So now we're just going to all yell until like it just becomes a cluster. And then that
Yeah.
changes again we're not at 240, but I can see where we're in this awkward adolescent stage where it's really hard to get stuff done. And
Mm.
I think $500 million companies have trouble with, at least from what I've read and talked to other people, is like it's very classic
Yeah.
where you try to bring in a bunch of people to like help professionalize, and then how do you digest them with the entrepreneurs at the same time, because you don't want to lose that like
Mm.
you know entrepreneurial spirit as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, definitely. What does the work culture look like? I mean, you said around 240, but where's everyone working? Remote, in office? What does that setup
Yeah,
look
we're
like?
about 60% located in Boston and 40% remote. We also have 2 dry ice facilities. We have one in Oklahoma and one in Iowa, where we produce
Okay.
our own dry ice. Um, and yeah, we're I guess what do they call it? Like a hybrid environment.
Hybrid.
I go to the office
Yeah.
every day. I really like being in an office. My executive team is in the office, so there is a
Mhm.
Boston heartbeat. But
Yeah.
we've actually been surprised at the lack of attendance in the office. We actually took on like a huge office and it's pretty empty, which has been interesting.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, the culture, like I think one of the most important things about a company is one of the most important jobs of CEO is setting the culture of the company, and we live by our
Yeah.
cultural values. So very early on, we wrote down like the company values, the things that we thought would help people be successful at the company. I talked about relentless
Mm.
improvement. There's also being customer obsessed. There's being accountable, and then humility or humble, and authenticity, which is like how you show up
Yeah.
every day, and like what are you willing to do and say the hard things, and are you willing to be humble, like realize that
Yeah.
this is not a this is like I people are like, oh my god, like ButcherBox has grown to be such a big company, and it's like I don't really think that was me. I think ButcherBox wanted to be something a lot bigger, and I am along for the ride. And
Yeah.
the people that really succeed at the company feel similarly. Like we can all be proud of the job we're doing, but also recognize that this is like a
Yeah.
pretty special thing that we're uh, held on to.
I love it. I love it. As we slowly wrap up here, looking at ButcherBox today and say like a listener were to purchase, what does that kind of consumer POV look like? So they go online, they place an order for a box. How long is the process? What does it look like from your side as well?
Yeah, so you would go to butcherbox.com, and you would choose what type of box you want. Most people choose the custom box. And within the custom box, you can choose a variety of cuts, and then you can choose like deals and specials on top of it. Your first box, we generally give a whole bunch of promotions, whether it's like free ground beef for life. I think right now it's like free wings and $50 off, depending on when you air.
Wow.
It'll change. And so we track the time between when your credit card swipes and when it delivers to your door. On
Mm.
average, which is not a great way to look at it, but is one way that we look at it. On average, you'll get your box within 3.4 days.
Okay.
That's from swipe to like it being delivered.
Got
But
it.
some zip codes are different. That's a whole body of work. In fact, like we need to
For
do a
sure.
much better job of like being like, you're going to get your box on this date, because people tend to be
Yeah.
worried about a frozen box of meat and like, when's it going to show up? And am I going to be home? And all those things. Then that's just like work
For
to be
sure.
done. But
Yeah.
what you'll get is so we believe fundamentally that meat, the way that meat is raised in this country, is broken and needs to be disrupted. And
Okay.
so we have gone out and we have found companies and people who are raising animals right, paying farmers well, treating the environment well, and treating like the workers in the supply chain well as well. And so
Yeah.
we obsess, and I could talk for an hour about like, you want to talk about salmon and like wild caught salmon and what our salmon is and why it's important, or you want to talk about beef, or you want to talk, like I could talk
For
forever
sure.
about, because we're like literally obsessed about bringing you the highest quality stuff, and the intersection of that with treating the animal super well, maintaining a great value for the customer, making sure that the farmer
Mm.
can like live on the land and provide for their family. Like those
Yeah.
things are the only things that will like those are the things that matter to make to change the way animals are being raised. We're about to
Yeah.
now announce, which I'm super excited about, in February, that well, I guess we're going to push. It's kind of already been there, but all of our
Okay.
products are third party verified, humane certified, which means that like
Amazing.
there's been a third party that's made sure that that animal is treated with the utmost of respect and care. No other company
Mm.
can say that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to people. Not to mention, you're
It's
going to get
huge.
a price that's cheaper than Whole Foods, certainly cheaper than the other people that are out there, whether it's Omaha or Good Chop or Good Rancher or anywhere else. Higher
Yep.
quality, better delivery service, better customer experience, like the whole thing. We have all of that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is to change the way that meat is consumed in this country. And if we can do that,
Mm,
that is such a massive, massive prize. Not really financially.
huge.
I mean, the money will come if you build a great business, but I don't care nearly as much about that as I do about like driving change in an industry that is desperate for change.
Yeah. Huge. I love it. Well, as we conclude the episode, I like to wrap up each one with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, something you've learned, regret along the way. I mean, you've shared so many nuggets. What would you say that would be?
Yeah. So I have this saying, which is or this whatever around head trash.
Mm,
I think that yeah, as you grow in business, the more successful you are, the more you need to be in tuned with your head trash, which is all the negative stories and all the negativity that's in your brain. Everybody has it, and understanding yours and how it can hijack you and how it can keep you from feeling happy. It can keep you from feeling content in the moment you're in. It can keep you from like truly feeling like your emotions and feeling joy. I'm a big
yeah.
believer in the Enneagram, which is one way of looking at like how do you separate and become unconscious, but really
Hmm.
just becoming curious about yourself is by
Mm,
far the most important. Like people who come to talk to me and they're like, "Oh, I want like a marketing campaign." Like ultimately it always turns to like, well, like how do you feel about yourself? Like are you taking care of yourself? Are
yeah.
you doing things for your brain? Are you, treating yourself with care? Because ultimately those are the things that make the
Mm,
difference of whether you're successful or not.
I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out ButcherBox at butcherbox.com.